Welcome to Cutoff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the producer of this podcast, and I'm happy to be here this week because, if you remember, last week we asked some of our listeners to share their stories with us and that we might put some of them on the air, and I believe we have one this week.
Here's one of them. So our listener, Stacey Jaros, reached out to me and said she had a pretty amazing story to tell, and would I like to hear it? And absolutely, I wanted to hear it, and I want you guys to hear it too. So we met up when she was down in LA for a little trip with her hubby, and did a little interview, and she told the story. So you're going to hear that interview right after this break.
If you're enjoying Cutoff Genes, please subscribe, rate, and review.
Hey, everybody. I am sitting here in a lovely hotel room across from the Hollywood Bowl with listener Stacey Jaros. And Stacey reached out to me and told me that she has a great story and she was going to be here this weekend. So I jumped on that because I love hearing great stories and I love sharing them with you guys. So welcome, Stacey.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me in your room.
Thanks for coming to my hotel room.
Sure. And Stacey's husband is also here too. He's being very quiet. This is Jeff Johnson.
Hi.
Okay, fine. All right, so we're gonna have you tell your little story. So why don't you give us some background?
Sure. I grew up in the Los Angeles area. Mm-hmm. I am donor conceived, which I learned about when I was 25 years old.
So sperm or egg?
Oh, sperm.
Okay.
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So my parents sometime in 1967 used a facility adjacent to UCLA over on the west side of Los Angeles. And they weren't told very much at the time, other than just, this is just how it's going to happen, and then you're going to have a baby. And according to my mom, she said she never really gave it much more thought after that. And my dad was he said similar.
Okay, so tell me about how you found out about it.
Well, I was in a previous relationship that was pretty serious myself in my mid-20s, and I think my parents had talked about it, but had divorced in my early 20s, very early 20s. And so they were living in separate homes. Mm-hmm. And one day I was visiting Dad, and he said, while I was standing, I wasn't even sitting, which
thanks, Pops.
He said, I need you to know, that I'm not your real dad.
He said it that way?
Yeah, I think he didn't really have the language for he said, but I'm your daddy. I'm your dad. Right. I'm your father. You're my child.
Correct.
And there was never any question about that, but they wanted me to know because they thought I might start procreating myself, and they wanted me to know that the science had progressed in a way that then people knew about their histories. Well, that they would know about your medical history, and they were worried about that.
Oh,
because there were already stepchildren in that relationship, so they knew that children were probably coming.
Okay, so interesting. So your dad told you, as your mom obviously wasn't there.
No, but I went right over to her house immediately.
How'd that go?
There were a lot of questions. It's a bit of a blur to me, quite honestly. It was an enormous shock. I physically favor my father and my father's family more than my mother's. As far as my coloring is much more
your dad's. Your dad's who raised you.
Social dad, I think, is
dad.
What I've
heard. It's not
is,
adoptive because you weren't adopted.
No, the dad who's married to my mom, his name is on my gift certificate.
On your gift certificate?
Bonus. On my birth certificate. Yes. And I think it was much of a shock. Mm-hmm. I didn't really give it a lot of a thought for a while until DNA testing became possible.
Sure.
And then the curiosity in me took over.
So when did you realize that you could figure something out?
Oh, well, when did 23andMe become like a public testing thing?
I think like the late aughts.
It would, yes, that sounds
Does that
about
sound
right. And then it would have been a few years after that, because at first I was like, I don't need to know about my medical history. I'm not having children. I don't plan on having children. I'm doing okay. And then all of a sudden I thought, it tells you about both sides of your DNA.
Right.
And then I got really interested.
Sure.
Some might say obsessed.
I wouldn't know what that's like. Okay, so you tested at 23andMe.
I did. I tested at 23andMe.
Now, was this before or in the middle of or after they used to do the health testing, and then that went away thanks to the FDA for a couple years, and then it came back. When did you do it?
It was after they removed it.
That's when I did too. Okay.
But right after, like, I drug my feet for too long.
Oh, that's right, because you were doing it for literally for the health reasons.
Well, both. I mean, just every curiosity that the results were going to happen. So I actually did believe that the law would come around eventually and understand that people have a right to know what is in their DNA.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I'll do it. They'll have the information if that becomes available again, which turns out it did. So I just went for it anyways. And my mom was a good sport. She said, I'll do it too, because I knew it would give me information.
Absolutely. Good for her. That's
and my husband did it too, and we all sat in the living room and spat together. And
yay,
it was
sit and spit.
Party. So that was fun. And turns out getting my mom to do it really was a huge gift from her.
Absolutely.
So
it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you did it and you sent it in, and then the results came back one day. And what happened?
The results came back in on Christmas Day, in fact.
Of course.
Telling me I had a half sibling.
Uh-huh.
So I had gone to bed early because I had to work the next day. Yeah. And I thought, I'm just going to check my email while my mom was visiting, and my mom and husband were watching Die Hard in the other room.
As you do.
Because it was Christmas.
It's a Christmas movie.
And it said, you have a half sibling, and literally I'm not going to sleep now. So I just kind of, my mom was supposed to leave the next day to go home. She lives nearby enough. And I said, hey, can you just stay one more day, Mom? You know, just one more day. And it was no problem because I still had to go to work.
Right.
So after work, I said, hey, I found a half sister.
So it was a half sister. Now, were you aware at that time that it could have been a half sister? It could also have been like a great aunt, I think, or niece.
I wasn't, because the way 23andMe reported it.
Yes.
I got an email
that said you have a half sister.
We have found a half sibling.
See, that's a little misleading, because that could be disappointing if it turns out to be. I mean, even finding any family is great, but if you're specifically looking for a half sibling, I think they should make that clearer, don't you?
I didn't learn about centimorgans.
Right. Until after that?
Long, far too long after that.
Okay.
Which is really disappointing, because I did reach out to people who still haven't, returned my queries.
Yeah. It happens.
They may or may not be half siblings. So I talked to my mom, and I said, well, here we go. Something's come up. And that night, after I shared it with my mom and my husband, and I knew things were changing, I was very excited. And I wrote a letter to the half-sibling match. And it was very hard to write, but it also just came right out of me.
Sure.
And I told my story. I'm, donor conceived, Los Angeles area, basic month I was born, time that the procedure would have happened. And 23andMe says we match this way. What do you know?
Okay.
And then I waited.
How long?
Not long.
Oh, good.
But it turns out she had no idea.
So she was not donor conceived?
She was donor conceived.
But nobody had told her.
But when I reached out to her, I didn't know whether I was reaching out to another donee.
Yes.
Or
Right.
a
nibbling.
a natural child.
Right.
Which
No.
I don't
Is it a nibbling?
care
Is that
for.
what that's called?
Yeah.
Or a dibbling. A dibbling.
Right.
They're called dibblings now.
I have a couple of dibblings.
Okay.
I'm so happy.
So, yes. So, you didn't know it could have. No, you don't, because it could be just whoever your donor was or is,
And
went on and had a life and have children.
Perfectly understandable.
Yes, sure.
They're obviously capable of doing that.
Yes, clearly.
So it's nerve-wracking to reach out to someone when you don't know what their story is. And in my mind, the thing that would have been most surprising to the recipient on the other end was if they had been raised by that person and that was their dad, then there's some stranger saying, hey.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it coming that another donor child would not have known the truth.
Right.
Especially when, decades later,
Sure.
right? Like things happen. Mm-hmm. So it turns out she didn't know. Mm-hmm. And she reached out to her father and asked him if he had been a donor, because that was her first thought. Oh, dad must have been a donor.
Right.
No. No.
Wait, what?
She and both of her, now she knows, half-siblings were donor children.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, they were donor children.
They were
I see what you're saying.
donor children. So
Yes.
and her youngest...
You never told them?
Never. And her youngest sister, who was in her early 20s, so, kind of just starting out her adult life, has a different mom. So they're not related by blood at all.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I kind of feel responsible for rocking their whole world.
Well, yeah,
but
the truth is the truth.
that's my leg to stand on.
Exactly. It's kind of I'm getting that as a tattoo, by the way.
Good plan.
Yeah.
I
It's important.
encourage it. Yes, and to cut my sister's story short, I'm really glad that happened because her dad passed not too long ago.
Okay.
So their whole family had time to make peace with it and talk to him, and each sibling got to talk to him about it. I'm actually going to cry thinking about it.
No, that's good.
Because I'm really sad that I caused that all to happen, but I'm so thankful that they had that opportunity.
Absolutely. It was prophetic. If you had found her or found each other after he had passed, it would have been a mystery, and they could have thought all different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had time to make peace with it, which makes me so happy. Now, my dad passed in 96, but I firmly believe he would encourage my search, so I'm really at peace with that. So.
Yeah, good. That's great.
And the greatest thing is that half-sibling I discovered lives about 45 minutes from me.
Really?
Yes. And she and I have become closer than best friends. She's kind of one of the greatest gifts of my life.
Okay,
So,
that's wonderful. Were you an only child?
I was an only child till I was 10.
Okay.
And then my parents adopted my first... No, I don't even know. You're gonna have to coach me. So
Okay.
my mom's cousin's son.
Your mom's cousin's son. So that's your second cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They adopted him.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So he was 5, I was 10. Unfortunately, he did pass when he was 20.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry.
Yes, because he was my brother.
Yes.
That was a
Right.
he's,
So you went back to being an only child, and now you had a half sister.
Yes.
So cool, and
Yeah.
and you get along, which is wonderful. So
Yes.
you basically, essentially, are sisters. How often do you see each other?
We see each other. So it kind of will go maybe once a month, and then it'll go a while. Different. But she's got 2 children. One just graduated from high school. One's just starting high school, and it's really wonderful because my husband is an only child, and I have no surviving siblings, so we don't have any
Oh my gosh.
nieces or nephews, and it's just like this whole package is such a gift.
Oh, that
And to
is.
have them live that nearby, it's just couldn't.
That's
be better.
wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, is there more?
Oh, there's more.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so having discovered that I could find out interesting stories through DNA, I thought, well, you only meet people that have opted in to a certain program. And I know Ancestry DNA exists. So let's just try it.
Okay.
So my mom and my husband and I had another spit party because I know that if my mom does it, I get far more information.
Absolutely.
Most of the information I've found is that my mom has an enormous family and they are really hard to weed out. I mean, I love them, but that's not why I'm here.
Right. Yes.
So it's still so useful.
So your mom is your biological mom. Yes.
Yes, she is. She went and had a procedure in a room, and that's how that happened.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tested on Ancestry, and Ancestry does report differently than 23andMe.
It does.
And you have to really dig down to figure out what they're telling you because they're kind of vague about it.
Right.
But they will tell you that you have close family. And I had what looked to me like a half-brother and 2 half-sisters.
Okay. And they were all listed as close family?
Yes.
Did it say close family to first cousin?
I believe it does.
Okay.
From memory, I
think that's what it usually says for half-sibling.
And then there was another individual in the next category down. And then there was a whole bunch of second cousins, and many of whom I recognized.
Right.
So I realized those were mom's side.
Right.
So I basically went and pilfered my letter to my sister, and I wrote to each of those 3 that were in my close family match. Basically the same letter.
Right.
There are 2 sisters or 2 females that are marked in the system, and 1 male. And the male wrote back very quickly and said, yes, my parents used a donor at this clinic. And
Same clinic?
Same clinic.
Okay.
He's 4 days younger than me.
Wow. Oh my God, you have a half twin.
I know. So as far as we know, like our moms could have been side by side in the waiting room. Could have very easily happened.
That's crazy. Wow.
It's kind of nutty.
Yeah.
It's kind of nutty.
Okay. So.
But he wanted to talk on the phone, which, well, okay, that seemed weird. Just because phones seem weird to me.
Me too.
But he wanted to talk on the phone, and that's fine. He lives in Southern California, so quite a ways away. Whereas I was able to meet my half sister. We went to a museum kind of right away.
Right.
The phone made a lot of sense. And we did talk on the phone, and it was wild. He's much more soft spoken, so he's kind of quiet with his words. I think he was like taking a lot in and processing. Makes sense.
Did he do the DNA test for the purpose of finding half siblings or finding a parent?
His half sister that he grew up with, who was also sperm donor conceived, has always wanted to meet and know her donor. It's been a drive of hers.
Right.
They kind of grew up in a broken household, I guess is one way to call it. And the news of them being donor conceived was learned when they were both quite young. And they clung to one another. And
were they, did they have the same donor?
that's the thing.
What is the thing?
Their mom told them
That they were.
assured them that they were.
Oh boy.
And both of their parents who raised them passed, I think, around a year, maybe 2 years ago. And so we'll never know if their mom actually believed that or whether the place, the clinic told her that. When they had the first procedure, she was adamant that any subsequent sibling procedures would be by the same donor.
Yeah.
That was kind of her line one of her demand. And they assured her, apparently, according to her, the story that she told her kids was that was the case. And so, as I said, my half-brother's half-sister he grew up with was driven
Mm-hmm.
And as we all know, males have a little something extra in the DNA department.
Yes.
And so he was very willing to help her out.
Okay.
So she was chosen to go on a television show. A little show called Long Lost Family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So their story was their first donor story. They've always done adoption stories or in the past.
Sure.
Adoption type stories.
Uh-huh.
And so she wanted to go on that show, and obviously it was very helpful to test his DNA as well. So he did. And when we spoke that first night, he said he had some information that he couldn't tell us. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, listeners, Julie just made a face.
I mean, why would you do that? This is not a game.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could tell that he was like, I don't want to say tormented, but it was really tearing him up to have that conversation. It all does become clear.
Okay.
But in the moment, there were a lot of questions.
Yeah.
In fact, after knowing one another and talking on the phone and meeting his wife does Facebook, he doesn't, so great. Now they have 4 children, so this is what these 4 now niece and 3 nephews
so you
look
have
like.
More of those.
And so then I introduced them to the half brother and the half sister met, so we all know one another. And then we went and we did a Skype call, which was a lot of fun.
The 3 of you?
Yeah, well, the 3 of us, and then their kids popping their heads in on either side of the screen. It was wonderful.
Love it.
Then we decided to meet.
Okay.
So he suggested we bring photo albums, which was super smart.
Yeah.
Like when we were growing
See
up.
each other
when we were
at different
kids.
ages.
Yeah. And like my most awkward
similarities.
teenage age looks just like
The
him.
best.
Like it's like great.
Yeah.
So it was really fun. But we don't look like we're siblings necessarily.
Uh-huh.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
So that day we had lunch and he still couldn't tell us. And it was months and months. So as my sister and I drove back to the Bay Area,
I would be strangling him.
I was convinced there was a lawsuit. Convinced. Because I have a law background, so of course.
Sure, and you have that would make sense.
I'm like, oh, well, this is clearly there's litigation he cannot talk about.
Okay.
So cut to, he says, okay, it was just promoed for the next season. I'm on a TV show.
Okay.
NDA.
Right.
Oh, duh.
Right.
So it all became clear.
Okay.
And, I mean, he could have told us, but he has so much integrity.
By the book, I guess. Yeah, because NDAs, you usually tell your close friends anyway. I don't know. Should I have said that?
I mean, people you share DNA with, like, yeah. So what happened was he tested on Ancestry for the show.
Right.
And they held his account while they were doing all their work. Right?
So he couldn't access it?
He didn't have access to it until their production was finished with, his story.
Uh-huh.
And then they handed it back to him. And like right then is when I tested. It was like within a week he got his, and they had his settings set so it came to his email when I sent him the message. So
Everybody do that, guys.
Well, if you want to learn about...
If you want to find people and you want to know that you change your settings. Okay.
Yes.
Moving on.
Definitely do
The more you know.
And so he saw it come right to his email and answered me pretty quickly, which thank you, whoever set up his account.
Yes.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So he was on Long Lost Family, and that is how they found out they didn't have the same donor.
Yes, and if you've seen that episode, it's pretty heart-wrenching. His half sister was quite devastated. And the TV show, they want to really yank on the emotions quite a bit.
That's why I can't watch it, frankly.
I had never watched it before because it was too much for me.
It's too much for me, too.
I think the word triggering comes to mind quite a bit. It's maybe fetal position.
Right. Well, there's that, and there's also the aspect of
one eye.
There's also the aspect of kind of like a contrived emotion. Like the hosts, I feel, overdo the emotion to make the whole scene more emotional. And I'm like, snap out of it. It's okay.
I feel like that's their style.
It's their shtick. I know. And that's what middle America wants, frankly. That's what viewers want. They want to, and they want everything to be a wonderful, happy ending and for people to love each other even though they've never met. And you know what I mean?
And life is complicated.
Yes. It's it's complicated. Exactly. And you can't, it's I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it.
As do I.
Okay.
It does. It seems pretty manipulative. To anyone who happened to see that episode,
I'm going to look it up now.
Well, I'll tell you exactly when.
Okay.
You can get it on what is it? TLC, right? TLC.
All right.
So she's fine now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there was a lot more background they filmed with the siblings that he and his half sister that wasn't played. So it's frustrating that they kind of only show one aspect of a person. It
always happens. Yeah.
And people are very like multifaceted.
Oh yeah.
But she found her donor.
Okay.
And met, and that was filmed and presented,
Okay.
and it was lovely. And,
Okay.
And she wanted a dad-type relationship, and he was happy to do that, and it's really awesome.
And that's
for them.
great. Yes, it worked for them.
The show found his donor, which, if you've been paying attention, you
He's
know
also
is
your donor.
my donor.
Okay.
He did not want to meet. And that's okay.
Okay.
We've already gone through how manipulative the show can be.
Yeah.
And television is not for everyone. Putting your
right.
story out there
So
is
he didn't
not
want to
for
meet
everyone.
on camera, definitely.
So and by we, I mean my half-brother and my
Half-sister.
I just call her sister. I
Yeah,
don't know. We're
sure.
really close. Anyways, the three of us spoke, and we thought, surely, once it aired, he would reach out.
Mm-hmm.
And that show aired in December. And he hasn't reached out.
He still hasn't.
He hasn't reached out, and none of the other people on Ancestry have answered queries.
Okay.
One of the people who's a close match, and I've now looked up the centimorgans and looked at the green chart.
Yes.
Thank you, Julie.
Well played.
My sister-in-law did explain centimorgans when we met in Fresno, but I didn't know about the green chart. Thank you. So she has a fake name on Ancestry. Which, I've Googled and run through
Absolutely.
Twitter and
Of course you
Instagram
have.
and
Yes.
anything I could think of. I can't find her. I can only find a locked account that may or may not be her because it's only similar.
Right. So you know nothing about her location or... Oh, it's so frustrating.
Don't know how old she is.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Don't really know if she's a half-sibling, right?
She could also be... Right, but she could also be a full daughter of your donor. Have you thought of that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
actually what we think. She's a locked tree with hundreds of people.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Something.
It's locked.
There's some story there.
Yeah. Right.
Sure.
I mean, I would assume that maybe it went something like, Dad, this says I have half siblings. And he said, oh, I should tell you something.
Well, right. That's exactly what I expected when I reached out to my first half sibling on 23andMe.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, and the other person has a small bio, so I know she's around my age.
Okay.
Has a real name, and didn't answer back. I've done.
Have you researched her?
Mild
As we do.
internet, so like little stalking. Yes, I've seen photos, and I know that she has a daughter who I think is one of the people in the next section down.
Sure.
And I think maybe she's not interested in meeting other, which is.
I mean, that's her prerogative.
Absolutely.
But it's frustrating for you.
It is.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, this whole.
I'm happy for her if she wants to reach out, if she's listening.
Yes. You think she listens to the show?
Well,
something tells me no.
well, if she, maybe she's just curious.
All right.
And that's fine. But I have to be honest in that we know our donor is alive. We being my half-brother and half-sister.
Right.
And for all of us, the Holy Grail is knowing about him.
Yes.
I mean, we each had fathers who raised us, and that's sadly they've all passed, which is really super sad.
Well,
yeah, I know. It's kind of, anyways. Yeah. Yes, but those were our dads.
Did Long Lost Family, when they reached out to him, did they at least ask for medical info, or background, any of that stuff?
That is a great question.
I mean, they know who he is.
Well, they know who he is because they went and knocked on his door and talked to him.
Right.
And he said, come back and tell me when it airs. I want to watch it. And they did.
Okay. So I would go back to Long Lost Family and say, hey, could you maybe reach out to him again and just tell him that we all are very concerned about medical conditions, and we just feel it's important that we know our background, our genetic background. I don't think that's asking too much.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And my sister and I had nothing to do with Long Lost Family.
So you need to have your brother do it.
Yeah, and I asked him we had another Skype meeting, which happened to be 1 year anniversary from the day we did. None of us knew.
That's awesome.
It was really awesome. So now we obviously have to do it every year.
Of course.
And we asked him if he thought he could reach out to the producer who gave him the information. Mm-hmm. And the producer said, we did this through Ancestry. You can do it too. Which is true, although we don't have all the...
Wait a minute.
Yeah. We found him through Ancestry. You can do it too.
Does that mean... That tells me that one of those other matches is his daughter.
Somewhere got to him. Or do you know what I mean? Like, connected the
dots.
Show. Yeah.
Oh, the dots and the show.
Yes.
The show dots.
The best kind. Somewhere they got connected. So I've obviously gone down like all through fourth cousins and starred all the paternal, which isn't very many. Like, there's probably 40 matches, and I have to weed through like 400 maternal. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like I said, love my family, but there's so many.
There's just so many. I know. Oh, yeah. So that's where you are now.
Yes.
Is
and
there
I'm
more?
Attempting mirror trees and
Yeah.
And it's funny, the last podcast of yours that I listened to, you mentioned kind of digging into your side that you already knew.
Right, my maternal side.
Your maternal side, and then the side that raised you, and kind of just seeing what you could find. And I've been doing that as well. I've been doing a lot on my maternal side.
What I've discovered is, I mean, I do this all the time now. I'm constantly working on people's trees. I'm fried, everybody. Because sometimes, I solved a case 2 weeks ago. I solved 2 cases in 2 days, 1 in 2 hours and 1 in 2 days.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm a dynamo. And then I've had these other 2 cases, and both of them are killing me. They're so complicated. And here's something that's interesting that I have thought about, but I think I may be experiencing it now. When you do it by doing mirror trees, even if you have everything in the right place and everybody is connected and you can figure out exactly who the parents should be, they're not.
What?
And because there's an NPE in there somewhere.
Yes.
And that messes up the whole game. So as much as you know what you're doing and do your job, sometimes the only thing you can do is wait for more DNA to come in from hopefully.
I'm not good at waiting.
Neither am I.
Not good.
Neither am I.
But I did have I know exactly what you're saying. I had an experience where I was looking at maternal family, and they were in, pre-statehood at Oklahoma, and I kept looking at census. Like, I don't know how these people are related to me. I found a third cousin match. I don't know who she is, just from knowing. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to work on a mirror tree pretty much for practice and curiosity. Sure. And I kept seeing family I know on the census. And like, so they would be on the same street. And I was thinking,
that's good.
Somebody, I was 60-70% convinced that somebody had visited somebody else's home. And then I did find the union further a couple generations back.
So they were of the same family and just lived close.
Yes, but I was nearly convinced that there was something going on that wasn't on paper. But yes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, it's good practice, right?
It's really good practice. Oy. So that is a wonderful story. The whole Dibblings thing is something that we're touching on more and more because it's a different dynamic to adoptees.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of people don't know where they stand on that. It's like there's not that, we've talked about this before, there's not that whole rejection part of it. You were made on purpose. You weren't a mistake.
Right. I get that. Although when you said second rejection the other day, I had to stop the podcast because it's not the same as adoption. I mean, I want to be really clear. I understand it's a very different situation. And I'm really thankful my parents made the choice to, go that kooky route in the late 60s. Like, who even...
That was new.
Didn't even know it was possible when they told me that had happened. I'm like, what? I remember the test tube baby. How is that possible?
Right.
So when our sperm donor chose not to reach out to us after that TV show we know he lives in California. So we know he lives here and we know he's alive, and it's a ticking time bomb, right? Like
there's something about knowing that somebody is there and and you can't do anything about it.
And there's no joke, like, walking around in the LA area, like,
you're looking at
people. Are you my daddy? Are you my daddy? Are you,
I've done that all my life. I didn't, not so much when I came to the U.S. So I guess I had that going for me that I knew that he wouldn't be here.
But you got on a plane?
I sure did. Thank you so much for doing this, Stacey. And thank you for coming and picking me up.
Thanks for coming to my hotel room.
You're welcome. All right. Okay, guys, we'll be right back after this.
Thank you for listening to Cutoff Genes, the new podcast starring Julie Dixon-Jackson.
All right, and we're back. I hope you guys liked that interview. Stacey was very much fun.
I thought that was so fascinating. We've spent a lot of time talking about your story as an adoptee and trying to find your birth parents and all that. It was really interesting to hear from somebody who was from a sperm donor.
Mm-hmm. We all have so many interesting stories and different circumstances.
Well, I mean, the circumstances are different, and the fact that she touched on, the differences between being someone who was given up as opposed to someone who was, a sperm donor who was made. It really brings up a lot of different feelings and emotions, and yet there's an overlap there as well, and I find that really fascinating. Yeah. She was a great interview. Yeah. Thank you, Stacey.
Thanks, Stacey. It was fun. Stacey wrote a little note to me that said that she'd forgotten to mention something that she wanted to touch on. And that was that her half-sister, Monique, originally took the 23andMe test because she's Jewish, and she wanted to track the diaspora. Monique expected her results to be 100% Ashkenazi Jew. According to 23andMe, she was only 50%, which was surprising for her, but she didn't think anything of it until Stacey reached out to her and said, "Hey, I think we're half siblings," and that's when she found out she was donor conceived. Wow. Crazy, huh? Also, one more thing, they have since found yet another half sister. I wonder how many are going to pop up.
1,001 frozen pops.
Yes.
I don't know. That's a Simpsons reference, folks. Look it up.
All right. So once again, thank you, Stacey, so much for agreeing to talk to me. I really enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for the follow-ups. And hey, everybody, that's the end of the show. You know what? The truth is in your genes.